This is the Creality SPARKX i7, a fast, sleek-looking bed-slinger 3D printer with optional 4-spool filament management system, and it looks nothing like the Creality printers of the past, because like many other brands, they've had to evolve rapidly to stay competitive in today's 3D printing landscape. But is this 3D printer just a superficial copy of one of the hottest printers on the market right now, or does the SPARKX i7 do things different? And is it worthy of your hard-earned money? Well, in this detailed review, we're going to find out. Let's get started. Before we dive in, let me just give a quick shout out to my new video course, A Beginner's Guide to 3D Printing, which is now available over on my website, makersmuse.store. Check it out in the video description below to get a head start in the wonderful world of 3D printing. Now, back to the video. How's it going, guys? Angus here from Makers Muse, and welcome to the first review of a Creality 3D printer I've done in years. This brand has been around since the dark ages of desktop 3D printers, with legendary machines such as the CR10 and Ender 3, whose popularity blew Creality into the stratosphere and spawned literally hundreds of clones and variations, many of which from Creality themselves. And I've been fairly critical, publicly, of Creality's bloated product lineup and frustrating inability to just hone in and focus on making a few really good machines. So when they reached out about a review of their new 3D printer, the SPARKX i7, I was pretty dang surprised, honestly. I only do unpaid and unbiased 3D printer reviews. That's how it's always been. Brands have zero control over what I say, I will not cave to pressure or bribes, and I will say whatever I feel is needed to give you a detailed picture on the pros and cons of a product. With all of that in mind, the fact this machine is here tells me that Creality have a fair amount of confidence in it, and I respect that. So let's start with the specs. The SPARKX i7 has a build volume of 260 by 260 by 260 millimeters, so it's a perfect cube, and about on par with other open frame 3D printers at this price point. It's a standard i3 style arrangement with the bed moving back and forth and the extruder mounted on a gantry which slowly rises up as a print is completed. It's equipped with a geared motor direct drive extruder which has this toolless tensioner arm. You can't adjust the tension in any way, but you can pop the front cover off and then snap it back easily to release tension on the filament for manual loading and withdrawing during repairs or to help clear any jams that may occur. And that's how I used it. The quick change nozzle is hardened stainless steel, so that should withstand the abrasive filaments pretty well, but it's completely proprietary, as is standard these days. There may be third-party sellers that offer it in future, but for now, your only source of spare nozzles is from Creality directly. And I list compatible filaments as PLA, PLA Silk, PETG, TPU, and PLA CF. Although they say you can print TPU, they specify Shaw 64D or harder. Yeah, more on that later. It's an open frame 3D printer, so don't expect much success with carbon fiber nylon or ABS. It's just not suitable for that out of the box. The whole unboxing experience is super duper easy. The printer comes well packaged and fully assembled out of the box. You don't have to attach the bed or gantry or anything like that. You just get out of the packaging and then remove a few plastic locks that help keep the axes from moving during transport. I did all of this casually live on stream and it was no issues at all. There is a little quick start guide included with a few basic tools, and I'd recommend flicking through that to help you get this printer set up, but that's pretty much all it's for. It's simple, to the point, but very basic and doesn't go any further than printing files already stored on the printer. It does, however, also cover the important calibration routine, which, like most of these super fast modern 3D printers, takes quite some time to run and can be a bit noisy. But it's very important that you leave it to do its thing on the surface you intend to print on, as the purpose of this calibration is to nullify unwanted vibrations and resonances during high-speed printing that will affect your print quality if it's not done correctly. Creality sent across the combo, which also includes a multi-filament management system they call CFS, or Creality Filament System. It takes up to 4 spools which sit on these little rollers, and they're fed up into the print head with small motors. These motors aren't for extruding, they're only used to withdraw filament from the hot end and then swap it with another during multicolor printing. It's a nice little enclosed box, but not much else. There's no heater for filament drying or any gauge for humidity. They just provide some desiccant packets so you can just throw inside. They also have the CFS Mini, and unlike the AMS Lite that Bambu Lab uses, which has a clever clock spring mechanism built in to withdraw filament, none of these systems are able to pull the filament back tight around the roll as they retract, which leaves some loose coils which could possibly lead to tangles, but so far I haven't experienced any. And now is as good a time as any to discuss the elephant in the room. This machine looks a lot like the Bambu Lab A1. In fact, you'd be pretty hard pressed to tell them apart. From the filament cutting mechanism to the filament purge flicker to the color scheme, it's not a one-for-one copy, but man is it close. But it's not just superficial, this is a well-built printer. It feels solid with nicely rounded injection molded components. It has thick 10mm diameter rods for the bed and a chunky linear rail for the X-axis gantry. They did add RGB though, so that's new. It's very pretty and serves some limited function, like indicating the print's progress, but you could just look at the print. You can change it on the printer interface, but it'd be nice if you could control it from the slicer, and there probably is G-code commands that do it, but I couldn't find any reasonable method of doing so. It's mostly here for looks. I'm not a fan of this medical equipment aesthetic that Bambu Lab has popularized and now Snapmaker, Creality, and so many others are conforming to, but let's be real, appearances are a terrible reason to base a 3D printer purchase off. It's all about the reliability, performance, and usability that really matter. So let's see how the SPARKX i7 stacks up with its first demo print. The machine itself only comes with an utterly useless filament sample in a vacuum sealed bag, which you should not print with. Companies have been doing this for years, and I've been saying this for years. It's a pointless inclusion that will almost certainly tangle and jam. So make sure you buy a spool at the same time as the printer and just save yourself the headache. Thankfully, Creality also sent over 3 rolls of their Hyper PLA, which is designed for high-speed printing, and I took a look at the demo files stored on the printer, and then to my surprise, yeah, no 15-minute benchy. 3D printers only really get one chance to wow someone, and the first demo print that they do should be something amazing, even if it's done with perfectly tuned settings that are unrealistic with exactly tuned filaments. That's what I was expecting, and that's what wowed me with the Bambu Lab A1 Mini. I had never seen a cantilevered 3D printer go that fast. But no, instead, Creality has just bundled this production machine with a normal speed benchy. It does look really good though. The filament has a slight matte finish, which is quite nice. It does smooth out the appearance somewhat, but it is an excellent result. The only flaw really is that infamous benchy hull line, but every printer does that. It's just shrinkage differences caused by the longer layer time as the hull begins printing. This little articulated octopus, however, is super cute. And again, it printed really nicely. I also had a crack at the only multicolored demo model on the printer, which is this keychain which takes advantage of 3 spools loaded into the CFS system. The color actually extends through the entire part, so the nozzle has to purge 3 times per layer. And every time it does, it flicks a little bit of filament off into, well, who cares, I guess. We'll be testing just how much filament waste there is from multicolor prints later in the video, but for now it's time to slice my own models with Creality Print 7.0. Now this is one area that Creality has really improved since I reviewed their machines last. Back in the day, old Creality slicers used to be poorly skinned versions of Cura 15, which persisted for way too long, and then they struggled to really nail down something that was up to date but usable. As a result, I almost always just rolled my own custom profiles in other slicers right off the bat, but this time it's different. This is sleek, it's nice with decent icons and a pretty good user interface. The layout may take a little bit of getting used to, but I think it's very usable for newbies and experienced 3D printing enthusiasts alike. And it actually does a few things I'd like to see in other slicers, like bundling the supports checkbox with the Paint on Supports tab, so you don't have to go and toggle and jump between different areas in the slicer menu. And it automatically turns on the camera as you prepare to send the model to the printer, and asks, is the bed clear? Which is a nice little sanity check. Yes, this is still built on open source software. Instead of a reskinned Cura, it's actually based off Orca Slicer, which is built off Bamboo Studio, which is built off Prusa Slicer, which ultimately was built off the original Slicer. It's all connected. And of course, like everyone else, it has a built-in file repository. I am not a fan, but every single brand today is trying to create their own walled garden where users can go and download models from, and Creality's no different. And just like the others, they want you to make an account before you can, well, download anything. I'm not gonna lie, the experience is pretty mid. There's a lot of junk models and a huge amount of AI generated slop, like images that don't match the model, which makes sorting and finding things very difficult. But look, that is a problem across all the file repositories right now, so it's not isolated to Creality, but it does make the experience super lame. But when I did find something I wanted to download, the process was, well, broken. This is the SPARKX i7, so I wanted to download the model either with settings for this printer ready to go and slice and send, or I just wanted to bring it in as geometry so I could just do it myself. That makes sense, right? Well, yeah, nah, you can't do that. The printer selection filter doesn't really seem to do anything unless I'm missing something, and you end up with printer profiles loaded into the slicer for a ton of machines you don't have or want, which leaves you having to manipulate and change it back to your own settings anyway, which is kind of annoying. I also managed to achieve some really impressive crashes when loading in certain models. I'm not sure if it's just me, but it needs a lot of work. So I'll be focusing on printing my own models for the most part. And we'll be starting with the Clearance Castle. This is a classic, and when I designed this, it was for like the Ender 3. It was super hard to print. It has many moving parts that have to work just right, and a drawbridge with massive bridging and overhangs, and it just smashed it out like it wasn't a challenge at all. At a 0.16mm layer height, it looks really crisp, zero complaints. Another model that I designed that used to be a challenge is this clearance gauge, and every single gap was cleared down to 0.15mm between surfaces, right off the printer. This twisty Christmas bauble is designed to push printers to the limit and has caused huge failures on comparable machines. But in this case, it came out great with only minor issues in one area where the overhang was a little bit too much for the cooling rate of PLA, but like any 3D printer would struggle with this area of the print. And to round out the challenge prints, this old Autodesk and Kickstarter collab test print has some of the best results I've ever seen on the spires. The rest of the print's good, but usually there's strings here. But there's like no strings to speak of, so Creality must have their cooling and retraction settings nailed. I was a bit sus that the prints might be super fragile as a result, but they feel just as strong as usual, so that hyper PLA must be pretty legit. Because PETG is listed as a compatible filament, I went ahead and gave it a shot with a thin layer of glue stick to prevent any damage to the powder-coated PEI print surface. But in my case, I might have been a little bit too easy because this print had some pretty fragile tree supports and one was unfortunately knocked over. So I killed that print and instead tried this watch stand, which I actually found on the file repository within the Creality slicer, and it printed really cleanly without any issues. So far, so good, but then I decided to try printing with 98A TPU. Just like with the Bamboo Lab AMS, you cannot print flexibles from the multi-filament system. You have to load them directly using the spool holder on top. But the print failed, and jammed the extruder so badly that I couldn't withdraw it. Clearing the jam was pretty annoying, but not impossible. You pop the front cover off, which has some kind of annoying clips. You just gotta rip it off, basically. And then you can get the tension arm popped open, and it gives you full access to the extruder gear. So I did that. I picked it free while the nozzle was at temperature, and I tried again. And surprise, surprise, it failed again. It was only at this stage I actually decided to check the specs to see if this machine said it actually could do TPU. And that's when I discovered that, in fact, it cannot. What? I haven't come across a 3D printer that can't print regular 98A TPU in years. Even the Ender 3 V3, the last 3D printer from Creality I reviewed, could do it. No issues at all. And other machines on the market right now at similar or even lower price points can print TPU at speeds we used to print PLA at. So what the heck is going on? Well, TPU needs a fully supported filament path from the extruder gear down to the hot end. It's like pushing a wet noodle down a tube. If there's any gap, and I mean any gap, that wet noodle filament will follow the path of least resistance and squish off axis, jamming the whole assembly up. For whatever reason, the extruder assembly on this printer has quite loose tolerances, and it's way too easy for flexible filament to kink and jam. This means that the only TPU you can print is 64D, a way harder material. It's still very useful, and that print I did in 64D TPU came out really good. I did eventually get some 98A TPU to work by bumping up print temperatures and disabling retraction, which is a really old school method of printing TPU, but it was also at a pathetic flow rate of 2 cubic millimeters per second. And no retraction at all means stringing will get much worse on TPU prints. Again, most other printers on the market can now print TPU at speeds we printed PLA just a few short years ago, so something is definitely up. It's probably really easily fixable with a better designed and constrained filament path, but that's not my job to fix. But it's the promise of multicolor 3D prints that will be the draw card for most people looking to get this 3D printer. And let me be very clear. This machine is capable of creating beautiful multicolor models. No problem. The process of adding color to the models in the slicer is clear and straightforward, and you can easily sync them to the filaments loaded on the machine. And in fact, Creality spools actually sync automatically thanks to the RFID tags on each spool. Usually I'm not much of a fan of spools with RFID tags, but I don't think Creality is going to try and lock down their filament on this machine anytime soon. And multicolor results using PLA are really impressive. They're crisp and clean with no color bleed from the single nozzle. But all of this comes at a cost, and what a cost it is. Waste. So much waste. To change colors, the machine must first cut the current filament, unload it, and then it loads into the next color, purging out all of the previous material into little piles of filament poop before flicking them away. Then it purges a bit more, then a bit more. You get the idea. It poops a lot. For models where the color change only happens at a few layers, it's not such a big deal, but what about a model like this with 4 separate colors and many layers requiring swaps between every single one? Well, you end up with this. I am not kidding. This is all of the waste that was produced from this single model, and this print took well over 24 hours to complete. You can cut this waste down by printing multiples of the same model at the same time, but there'll still be plenty. The promo page claims 50% less waste, but less waste compared to what? This style of multicolor printing is exactly the same as the one used for the Bamboo Lab A1 and A1 Mini, so any differences will be minute. And to be fair, I roasted Bamboo Lab for this as well. If you want to print lots of multicolor models, then I can only really recommend a proper tool changer like the Snapmaker U1. The waste from that machine is minute. So yes, I get it. Multicolor printing can be fun, but I honestly think this single extruder approach is ridiculous, and I'm not sure why it's always the selling point for these machines. Because I can't really seriously see anyone using it for more than a few prints before they get tired of the incredibly long print times and huge amounts of material waste, which, by the way, will end up all over your floor unless you figure out a good way of managing it. If you thought stepping on Lego hurts, well, wait till you step on a nice and sharp jagged PETG filament poop at 3 AM. Yeah, that stings. Roasting aside, the filament system is genuinely useful. I like the form factor a lot better than the AMS Lite, that alien tech looking thing. This is just a nice box that you could easily mount on top of the printer with a simple frame if you so wish. It keeps the filament organized and makes it easy to swap between colors from the computer. They're just ready to be loaded into the machine and then it's good to go. But for prints like this that need its own weight or more in waste, I don't think so. But Creality did just launch their own filament recycling system on Kickstarter, and it's got like $5 million of funding, so maybe that's the solution to the waste problem. I'm definitely very curious to see how that pans out. Next up, the app. Yes, it has an app. With the app, you can send prints over the cloud and control the machine from anywhere, including viewing the webcam to check on your progress. This is a huge plus for many people, especially us old school print guys who have PTSD from coming back to a 12-hour print to find out it utterly failed. You can monitor your machine from anywhere, out and about, at the gym, on the toilet. You can check your print. And you can also kick off prints if you're not even home, so they're ready for you when you get there. Personally, I'm not much of a fan of cloud or apps for anything, and I don't really like taking the security risk, but it is absolutely there if you need it. And if you don't, then you can just run this machine without logging into anything. You can connect it to your local network, and then print direct to it from your slicer from any computer on that network. And it even has a full-size USB port, so you can transfer files the good old-fashioned way and keep it off the network altogether, if you so wish. Creality also rolled out an AI model maker with this machine called CubeMe, which turns portraits into 3D models ready for printing. It features prominently in the promo video, and it makes me profoundly uncomfortable. Would you really want to upload images of your child to an AI service? Again, Creality is just following the trend here. Bamboo Lab and many others are pushing AI modeling services like these, and I will continue to call them out every single time. If you want your 3D printer to stay interesting, then fire up Tinkercad, design something with your kids, and actually learn something. Another AI feature is the spaghetti detection, which uses the camera to see if a print has failed. It's there and it's turned on, but I couldn't get it to work. I sent a print that was guaranteed to fail, and it didn't trigger, and then I just chucked bits of other prints onto the print bed to try and force it, but nothing. So, should you get the Creality SPARKX i7 3D printer? Or should you go with the machine it was possibly inspired by? Or something else entirely? Well, let's start with the cost. At time of filming, the SPARKX i7 color combo is exactly the same price as a Bamboo Lab A1 combo, $649 Australian. That's down to the dollar. There is no question they're desperately competing for that sale. So the difference will come down to what you want to do with it. For rapid PLA printing, both are good, but I'm tempted to say that the SPARKX had slightly better print quality, ever so slightly. It might just be because their filament is quite good and it's tuned for it, but all a beginner needs is a good tuned profile and reliable filament to get up and running, and I can appreciate that. The camera is actually really decent with a faster frame rate than the A1, and it's in a good position to monitor your print as it prints. And for multicolor printing, both are equally capable, but it comes with an equally annoying cost of filament waste and time. And yes, I know I keep ranting about it, but flicking filament purges randomly away with a little flicky mechanism, ain't it? Even if there was another wasteful purge pillar, I feel that would be preferable. But having the end user have to figure out a catchment bucket or 3D print some dodgy solution for something that the manufacturer couldn't even be bothered to solve is just really lazy and just unacceptable. But I'm not gonna lie, the fact it can't do normal TPU was so surprising, and it's a massive disappointment. I don't know what happened there, and I hope they're able to remedy it, because I would be more than happy to test an updated version and show you guys, yes, it can print TPU, because look, up to this point, my A1 Mini has been my go-to machine for flexible filaments, way softer than normal 98A TPU. It's handled basically everything I've thrown at it, and it costs, what, $300 Australian? So yeah, that one's a bit weird. Creality is a gigantic brand. It really is huge, and they've been in the 3D printing space for over a decade. But historically, they've always struggled to actually spend the time perfecting a design. Like, they hit it off for the Ender 3, but they never really were able to just improve it linearly. They just made all these versions of it that confused people and saturated the market. And it's just not a really logical approach to improving your lineup. And in this hugely competitive market, it really is the small things that make all the difference. You know, like having that amazing demo print that wows that new user, or a seamless experience going between the ecosystem or the app to the printer to print things, even if it's a tiny curated range of objects. Stuff like that will mean you'll get a fan for life, and then they'll keep upgrading to your machines. Instead of being like, oh, you know, I tried that printer, but just wasn't quite there, and now I'm going to try another brand. And I really do hope they're able to really lock in. Otherwise, I wonder if they'll end up like Tier Time, who had the consumer 3D printing space all to themselves for so many years, yet they just failed to stay relevant and have just faded into obscurity. As always, this video has been my own opinion. Creality sent me the SPARKX i7 free of charge for purpose of review, and no money has changed hands. And if you want to level up your 3D printing, well, then you're in the right place. I've got a ton of resources waiting for you in the video description below, along with my brand new video course, A Beginner's Guide to 3D Printing. Your support helps keep this channel independent and, well, still operating in these interesting times. And of course, you'll also find a purchase link for this printer if you're interested in checking it out. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.